The Cincinnati Scenic Railway. The CSR is a group that operates both the Lebanon, Mason, and Monroe Railroad in Lebanon, Ohio, and the wildly successful Ohio Rail Experience across western Ohio. Currently, the CSR has started a campaign on charity.gofundme called Save the Chessie. The goal for the campaign is to raise $35,000 to save from her Chessie System / Baltimore, Ohio 6955 from getting scrapped. 6955 is one of the few ex-CSX GP30s to not get rebuilt as a slug or another type of locomotive. Currently, it's owned by National Railway Equipment and is in storage at their facility in Silvis, Illinois. The current plan is to raise $35,000 to purchase the engine from National Railway Equipment. Once purchased, the Cincinnati Scenic Railway will then need to raise some more money to prepare 6955 to be moved back to Ohio and to be restored back into its Chessie System colors. Once restored, they plan on operating it on both the Lebanon, Mason, and Monroe Railroad and the Ohio Rail Experience in excursion service. But they only have a limited time to raise the $35,000 to get the engine. They only have until October 31st, 2020 to get the money to secure the engine from National Railway Equipment, and if this goal is not met, there is a good chance that 6955 will be scrapped by NRE. So, if you wish to help save this piece of history from being scrapped and would also like to see some Chessie System power in excursion service, go to charity.gofundme and go to Save the Chessie to donate your money. They also have a website and a Facebook page where you can also learn more about 6955 and what is going on at the moment. The link to the GoFundMe and the website and the Facebook page will be down in the description box down below, so you can go check it out. Just to let you know, guys, I wasn't paid or anything to make this ad for the campaign. I just want to help spread the word about what's going on and how to help get this engine saved. I mean, we were able to save Kansas City Southern 503 from getting scrapped, so perhaps we can save this engine as well. I also strongly encourage you guys to share both the charity and this commercial to everyone to help spread the word, and hopefully we can save the Chessie. It's the morning of June 6, 2020. We are just south of Circleville, Ohio, along CSX's northern subdivision, where we see a southbound CSX grain train led by 4 GE locomotives. On this day, my dad, brother, and I were out to try and catch Canadian Pacific 7023, the Air Force unit, as it led a southbound Norfolk Southern ethanol train across the Columbus District. I had heard from my friend Jake the night before that 7023's train was supposed to make an early morning arrival in Columbus, so that's why we were out so early. Luckily, that turned out to be not true, but when I figured this out, it was already very early in the morning. So we decided to go out anyway to try to find a good spot along the line, and in the process, we just so happened to come across this CSX grain train, and we decided to go and chase it. In the process of trying to get ahead of this train to catch it, we ended up at a private driveway at the DuPont Circleville Works, which is a chemical plant in Circleville, Ohio. Although this crossing does make a nice spot on the northern sub to catch trains at, the DuPont plant probably doesn't take kindly to people hanging out here. The only reason why we were here was because I thought this was another spot down the road, and by the time I realized that wasn't the spot, we had already turned in and the train was just behind us. So I made do with what I was given, resulting in this shot. After the CSX train got by, we then went into Circleville, where we then caught a northbound Norfolk Southern ethanol train at the South Pickaway Street crossing. While the northern sub of CSX runs around Circleville on its west side, Norfolk Southern's Columbus District runs through town, using many railroad crossings in the process. At one time, this town could boast of 3 Class I railroads running through town: the Chessie and Ohio, now CSX, the Norfolk and Western Railroad, now Norfolk Southern, and the Pennsylvania Railroad, also now part of NS. While the C&O and NNW both ran their lines through town north-south, the Pennsylvania Railroad ran an east-west main line through town, running from Cincinnati to Twinway, Ohio, where it connected with the PRR's Panhandle main line, bypassing Columbus, Ohio. Unfortunately, by 1976, when Conrail was formed to take over the old Pennsylvania Railroad, by then Penn Central, it was determined that the line was not viable to keep in operation, so it was abandoned. When Conrail was first formed, one of its first goals was to get rid of any non-profitable lines it had on its system, and the Cincinnati Trimway line was unfortunately one of them. As of today, most of the old line is now abandoned, with only a short section of track in town here still being used by Norfolk Southern to serve an industry. After the ethanol train got past us, we then decided to go back north towards Asheville, Ohio. As we were doing that, we then noticed a northbound CSX empty coal train on the northern sub. We were able to catch it as it went underneath the Wiegand Road Bridge north of town. CSX's northern sub is a single-tracked main line that only sees about 2 to 3 trains per day as of 2020. As a matter of fact, this was the last CSX train we saw on this day. After the CSX coal train got past us, we then decided to drive into Asheville to wait on CP 7023's train. We got set up along Randolph Street along the Norfolk Southern main line and began to settle into our car to play the waiting game. After almost 2 hours of waiting, we then saw the headlights of 7023 rounding the curve, and we quickly scrambled out of the car to get a shot of it. Pacific 7023 is one of 5 special locomotives commemorating both the Canadian and United States militaries. In this case, 7023 commemorates both the Canadian and U.S. Air Force being painted in the two-tone gray paint scheme, which was designed after the same paint scheme worn by Canadian and U.S. fighter jets. Also, did you notice the U.S. flag on the side of 7023? Well, as part of the paint scheme, all 5 engines wear a U.S. flag on one side and a Canadian flag on the other to represent both countries. All 5 locomotives were revealed to the public in late 2019 and have been pulling trains on the system ever since. After we saw the train here, we then drove back to Circleville, beginning our chase of this beautiful locomotive. Once in Circleville, we then saw the train at the South Scioto Street crossing as it was blasting its horn through town. CP-7023 was originally built in 1998 as an EMD SD90 43 Mac as CP-9128. By 2012, 9128, along with all the other SD90 43 Macs owned by CP, were put into long-term storage up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. CP tried to sell off the locomotives in 2012 and in 2013, but no one was interested. Then, in 2015, Norfolk Southern, another buyer of the SD90 43 Macs, started a rebuilding program to rebuild their own fleet into new SD70 ACUs. Noticing how successful the rebuilding program was going for Norfolk Southern, Canadian Pacific announced in 2018 that they were going to be rebuilding their own fleet of SD90 43 Macs into SD70 ACUs. Unlike Norfolk Southern, where they rebuilt their locomotives at the Juniata shops on their own railroad, Canadian Pacific contracted Progress Rail to rebuild their locomotives in Mansfield, Kentucky and Muncie, Indiana. Once the deal was struck, 9128, along with the other engines, were then sent down the Progress Rail, and by late 2019, they were rebuilt as SD70 ACUs. After we saw the train here, we then drove down to Chillicothe, Ohio. Once in town, we then got parked at Strasser Park and walked down to the Scioto River Bridge. The Scioto River Bridge carries the Columbus District of Norfolk Southern across the Scioto River and into downtown Chillicothe.
Really good looking spot right now. Yeah.
Although most of the Columbus District is double-tracked, a small section of it, starting from just across the bridge to just north of Omega, Ohio, is single-tracked. So as a result, CP-7023's train was forced to stop and wait on the other side of the bridge because there was a northbound manifest freight coming up from the south. We got to watch as the manifest freight then crossed the bridge. It was being led by Lehigh Valley 8104, one of Norfolk Southern's heritage units. As the train continued to cross the bridge, it looked like for a minute that part of the train was separated. Don't worry, those sections of the train were connected thanks to flat cars and steel coil cars without their tops, giving the illusion of separation, thanks to the bridge's steel side walls. Once the Lehigh Valley train was across the bridge, dispatch gave permission to CP-7023's train to come across the bridge and enter onto the single-track main line. After the ethanol train got done crossing the bridge, we then drove down to just south of Waverly, Ohio. Here, we got set up at the River Road/Road 52 railroad crossing, where we watched as the train came running around the bend past us. Here, the northern sub of CSX and the Columbus district of Norfolk Southern come together for a short second before going their own ways to get to the Ohio River. While the Columbus district goes along the Scioto River through Piketon, Lucasville, and ultimately ending in Portsmouth, the northern sub turns east to follow the Rocky Fork and Little Scioto rivers through Minfield, Ohio, before crossing the Ohio River on a big steel bridge at Sciotaville, which is just east of Portsmouth, Ohio. Once the train got past here, we then got back on the road and was able to catch it again just north of the Highway 23 Fairground Road intersection, north of Lucasville, Ohio. Once the train got past us here, we then drove in to Portsmouth, Ohio, where we saw CP 7023 one more time at the Bertha Avenue Railroad crossing. Portsmouth, Ohio is an interchange point on Norfolk Southern. 7023 will pull its train into Star Yard, and once there, it will then change crews. Once the new crew is on board, it will then take the train across the Canova district, which runs from here to Williamson, West Virginia. But we'll end our chase of 7023 here. After we saw the train here, we then went to go visit some relatives we had in the area. But as we were doing so, I then noticed I had lost my scanner. A scanner is a radio device used by rail fans to listen to train crews and dispatch to figure out where trains are on the railroad. I first thought I left it at the Bertha Road Railroad crossing, and by the time we got back there, it wasn't there. At first, I thought that in the time we weren't here, someone came along to the crossing, found the scanner, and took it for themselves. But my dad and brother convinced me that perhaps I had left it at one of the more rural spots we had been to today. So we decided to stop at those spots just to check. As we were doing so, going back up the Columbus district, we then caught a southbound intermodal train at the Blakeman Road Railroad crossing, north of Lucasville, Ohio. Unfortunately, when we got to the area where we caught 7023 in Lucasville, the scanner wasn't there either. But when we got back to the River Road, Road 52 rail crossing, apparently I lost it in Waverly, this spot right here where we caught the train, and it's laying on the ground where no one could have gotten to it. And with the retrieved scanner in hand, we then continued north towards home. But as we were doing so, we decided to take a different path, which led us to the small town of Omega, Ohio, where we caught a loram rail grinder train at the Road 335 railroad crossing. Once the loram rail grinder got past us, this brought an end to our great day of train chasing. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this short video, and I hope you guys have a great day. See you later.